One.
Hello and welcome to the Village Preservation Society of East Hampton's conversation with Supervisor Kathee Burke-Gonzalez. My name is Kathleen Cunningham. I'm the Executive Director of the Village Preservation Society, and we're going to have a conversation today with Kathee Burke-Gonzalez, who's running for her second term as East Hampton Town Supervisor. We're going to try to make a couple of questions, ask her a couple of questions that are of importance to our organization, but it's basically going to be a free-flowing conversation to the degree we can make that happen in 30 minutes. So I'd like to introduce Supervisor Burke-Gonzalez, and thank you for coming.
Well, thank you for having me, Kathee, and I really appreciate the Village Preservation Society doing this year after year. We just mentioned earlier, the first time, we did this was back in 2013.
I know.
So it's great to have
Yeah.
the conversation and the catch-up.
Yeah, thanks for coming. So I'm going to use a couple of the questions that we used with the town board candidates earlier, but I'll start with this one. The town faces powerful pressures from overbuilding, traffic, and the lack of workforce housing. These challenges impact the character of our historic villages, overburden the infrastructure, erode the quality of life, and threaten the fragile natural environment that makes our town so special. In an era where there are those calling for the abandonment of regulations and others calling for even more restrictions, how do you approach these issues, and what do you think is the right way to find a balance?
Wow, that's a lot to unpack there.
It is, I know, which is why we're just relaxing
A big
and having
question,
a chat. Yeah.
and I have to say that a couple weeks ago, you folks had your, Village Preservation Society had your awards
Ceremony,
ceremony,
right.
which was great, and Anthony
you.
Wood was your, the author, and
Speaker,
was
right?
was interviewed by Joe Rose, and I just found it educational and enlightening. So, we are feeling a great deal of pressure. There's a lot of outside money that's coming into East Hampton that want to monetize and have looked at it as an investment, part of their investment portfolio. And we want East Hampton to maintain, like it says in the comprehensive plan, a beautiful and extraordinary place to live, work, and raise a family. So that's really the balance, right? How do we maintain a year-round community that's sustainable, but also recognize and acknowledge that we have a summer season and, but we also see that our summer season keeps pushing out now, right? It used to be Memorial Day to Labor Day, then it was Mother's Day to Columbus Day, and, and it just keeps getting a little bit longer. So it's, community input, right? We make our best informed decisions when we hear from our constituents and we hear from the people who live here and work here. So that's kind of the process that we've taken. That's why, work sessions are so important. And, part of our administration, we, on our Instagram and social media, folks follow. We publish our work session agendas so community knows what the topics we're talking about. We make it really accessible for people, whether they come to the meeting or they can call in to LTV with an 800 number. And then we have our public hearings. So, we're under a lot of pressure. I'm sure my colleagues who were here earlier, you had a debate with the town board candidates, talked about, the pressure for like these huge houses on small lots. We've kind of rolled that back. We introduced new legislation to reduce house size and figure out the pressure there. Public safety is probably one of the top responsibilities of the town board and of the supervisor. So you mentioned traffic and things like that. So we've been we installed, a roundabout at a very dangerous intersection. You live up near there, so you're
know that intersection well.
really
Yes.
well aware of it. So, we've had some folks reach out for stop signs. We have reduced speed limits, which requires a public hearing in the town because we can't go below 30 miles an hour. So it's just, we need to hear from our constituents. We need to hear from the folks that live here in order to help us balance what's happening in our community.
Right. Sort of on that topic, we talked about earlier, just the commercialization of the residential communities, the hollowing out of residential neighborhoods by either individuals or companies that are buying homes and then listing them on social media for, very short-term rentals, and the, whole set of impacts that flow from there. I know it's a difficult thing to govern, but what's the plan for that, I
Yeah,
think?
well, I see it in my own working class neighborhood where, I'll look out the window and I see a couple with a dog I've never seen before
Right.
because they're only here for the week or the month or whatever. So there's a lot of turnover there. I think we're going to have a work session discussion on October 7th. It's something that Deputy Supervisor Kate Rogers is bringing to the board, and how we want to move forward and look at these short-term rentals because folks as I said, companies are coming in and monetizing homes. It's also hurting our hotels and motels because folks are, rather than book, maybe in a hotel in Montauk, they're doing an Airbnb and staying there, and maybe they're, using that as their home base and not going out to our restaurants and kind of fueling that economic engine. So I think we're gonna have a really robust discussion in the next few months on how we tackle that.
Yeah, it's a hard problem. One of the things that I think a lot of people don't realize is that the hotel taxes, especially in Montauk, play a big role in not just town government, but county and state government. That
Sure.
a lot of people don't realize that that money fuels a number of governmental budgets, and that when that is gutted, the way it has been, to have rooms available mid-season, in some of these heavily tourist areas is a big problem up the chain. It's not just ours. It's
Right,
a
but we
number of
send
people.
millions of dollars to the county
Yeah.
in hotel
Yeah.
motel tax.
Right.
We don't see that money come back to us.
Right.
To the extent, so.
100%. Yes.
So that's also
Yes.
something we're looking for more equity with.
Right.
And in fact, the Montauk Chamber and Leo Daunt, who's
Right.
the president there,
Right.
executive director, I guess,
Right.
has been really, banging that drum
Yeah.
with the county and working with county
Yeah, I
legislator Ann
remember there was
Welker.
some kind of walkout or something a couple of years ago that he was trying to organize to protest that because, and that brings me to another question that's, about 20 years ago, Five Town Rural Transit, which was an organization I was involved with, we worked with Fred Thiel and did an assessment of MTA taxes that the East End pays. And that was 5 East End towns, East Hampton, Southampton, Shelter Island, Riverhead, and Southold. And it included a real estate transfer tax, but everybody knows, you can see on your cell phone bill, there's a little MTA tax. It's part of the gas at the pump. It's, it's ubiquitous, that tax. And at the time, we were giving $40 million to the MTA. And reasonable people could argue we weren't getting $40 million of service. We weren't getting a fraction of that in service. Now, I know we've had the South Fork Commuter Connection, and that's been helpful, but, for certain segments of the community, it doesn't actually work as a transportation option. But I wondered, and we did ask this of the town board candidates, if East Hampton might be willing to instigate a study of that, a similar study with the other townships to maybe use that as leverage with the MTA and the state, because, Fred Thiel was such an effective legislator for us, and
Sure.
Tommy John Schiavone is carrying on in his place, but there's only so much he can do. And I think it's a fair complaint, on the same par as you're saying with the
Right.
county and state, the taxes that we send along to them. We don't always get what we need in services from those agencies, but what do you think about something like that?
So, two things. First, South Fork Commuter Connection has been tremendous
Right.
for us.
Right.
We have, like, when the Long Island Railroad was about to go on strike, we
Right.
had reached out to everyone that uses it, and we've got over two dozen town employees
Oh, I'm so glad
are
to hear that.
using
That's
that
great.
service.
Yeah.
The school districts,
Right.
numbers of teachers. In fact, we now, I believe, have 3 buses that just meet at East Hampton Village train station.
Yeah, I know
because
the Montauk School sends a
Right,
bus
and
also, yep.
the town does.
Yep.
We get a grant through the
Right,
state,
right.
and we have a bus. We have buses at East Hampton Village, Amagansett train station, and Montauk train
Excellent.
station.
Oh, I didn't realize the town had taken that
So,
over.
and
Good
we
for you.
have
Yeah.
worked with staff to be able to flex their schedules. We have a flex policy, so we have staff that come in at 7:00 in the morning, and then the bus picks them up at the town hall campus at 10 minutes to 3 to
Excellent. So
catch
they
the
can get that
3:15.
3:15 train.
So,
That's great.
so that's been a,
Right.
godsend, really.
Is
But
it running on Fridays? Or-
it is now. So
Okay, 'cause
during
that was a
so
big
what was
thing.
happening
Yeah.
because of the cannonball on
Right,
Friday
right, right, right.
afternoons, there was the 3:15 train ran, but the 5:15 train did not
Didn't,
run,
right.
and they ran buses.
Right.
So what most folks did is they flexed their schedule.
Right.
So everybody that was taking the train took the
The
only
3:15,
train
yeah,
out.
the only.
So,
only option.
and the Hopper Hampton Hopper has been a
Been great,
tremendous
too.
partner.
Yes,
They've really
yeah,
been great.
yeah.
But, so before Fred, retired from state
Right.
government, he had, really lobbied hard and made sure that there, in the MTA capital plan,
Mm-hmm.
was money for, what we need is additional sidings,
Right.
and we need our infrastructure upgraded.
Right.
So that, we made it into the plan. So that's a good thing,
That
right?
is good,
And then
yeah.
I was in the fortunate position, when the governor came to town in August, she came out to the Montauk Playhouse, we cut the ribbon on the Playhouse, and she announced the $2.2 million for Napeague and Heather Hill State Park. But I also got 15 minutes with her, one-on-one.
Great.
We actually met in the coat room. It didn't look like a coat room. It actually looked like this. It was a high top with stools. But
That's so funny.
one of the things I talked to her about was we really need that investment in the
Yes,
MTA
yes,
out here.
yeah.
We need it for transit. We need it.
Right.
We need more frequent trains. We can't just have 2 trains in the morning and 2 trains in the
Mm-hmm,
afternoon for town staff because, as you said, it doesn't work for everybody. The schools have been really flexible, the town has been flexible, and there's doctors' offices that are
Right.
using it, the Ross School.
Right.
But we need more options
Right.
there with train schedules.
Right.
But she sounded committed
Amenable,
to it.
yeah.
So it's something that's something that our administration has really worked on, is building those relationships with our government partners. With the governor and the governor's office. Yesterday, David Lease, council member David Lease and myself went over to Greenport because there was the bill signing by County Executive Ed Romaine on the working waterfront legislation.
Right,
And every single time the county executive sees me, he says, "Supervisor, what can I do for you?"
That's great.
So we have a great working relationship, and they're our partners in this. And this, and the same we had over the summer. There was a Long Island Association did an event up at West Wind, I think it was called. To them, that's like the East End.
I
I'm
understand. It's way up.
It's
get
like,
it, yeah,
I'm giving myself an hour and a half to
Right.
get there. I don't call that the East End. But it was all 5 supervisors. And we have a really collegial group, and we bounce ideas off each other all the time. So it's been really great. I've also got a great working relationship with Senator Schumer's office and
Right.
Senator Gillibrand's office.
Yeah.
And that's what we need, right?
Right.
Because we are all the way out here,
Right,
and we need
right.
our government partners in order to deliver.
Right. There used to be an organization called the East End Supervisors and Mayors. And
Yes.
it would meet, like at sort of an odd interval, maybe every 8 or 10 weeks, 5 or 6 times a year maybe, and each elected official would take a turn hosting so that everyone got a chance to kind of see what it was like. And because a lot of people don't realize that back in the day, that was the organization that governed the 5 East End towns until they voted to become part of the Suffolk County Legislature. And now we're 2 of 17, in there. So it still has, a lot of relevance and real importance because our situation, those 2 peninsulas and that island have so much more in common than the other 5 towns that make up, 10 towns in Suffolk County, and half of them are here. So
Right.
even though we don't represent half the population. So I'm glad to know that's still,
Yeah, so
you know,
EASMA, East End Supervisors
Right.
and Mayors Association, we meet every other month. So we're meeting 6 times a year. In fact, our next meeting is a week from tomorrow.
Great.
And, Maria Moore, the Southampton
Town
supervisor,
supervisor,
is the chair of that organization.
good.
And she plans, very thoughtful presentations. Normally what happens is we have 1 or 2 presentations before we get to have lunch.
Right.
So-
Right, right.
And next week, we're going to be hearing from Kate Carbonara from the
Oh, yeah.
retreat. And we're going to be hearing from a member of the DEC Resiliency Group.
Oh, good.
So,
Good. That's good to know.
And then the other organization that I belong to is the Suffolk County Supervisors. And we meet every other month as
Right,
well.
right.
And we rotate where those meetings are. And the Supervisor Schaefer from Babylon.
Right.
Is the president of that organization, and he kind of sets the agenda for those meetings. So it's really good to network with my colleagues.
yeah.
It's also good to commisserate,
Right,
because we
right.
know what the kind of
definitively
pressures we're
exactly.
under, and and it's sometimes it's just nice. You can
Right.
kind of let your hair down a little bit.
Right. That's good. I'm so glad to know that the East End Supervisors and Mayors are still active, and hopefully maybe they would consider, this study that we're suggesting, because I think the dollars and cents of it are sort of shocking, we just don't get the service that we're paying for, and I mean, among other things, but anyway, let's move on to historic preservation.
Sure.
Because that, as you know, is a primary goal of the Village Preservation Society. And I guess, I have 5 subset questions here, of course, which is, not all that easy to
We do them one at a time.
Conversation, but I guess 2 things are, how important do you find historic preservation to the community? And do you support outreach and education for people to have a better understanding of the contribution of historic preservation and our historic assets to basically to real estate and home values? Part of the reason we're such a desirable place is because of the way we look, and it's not a superficial asset, because these historic buildings are centuries old, many of them, and require a lot of maintenance and upkeep. And I think people don't they love coming in, they love driving down Main Street and seeing the historic districts, or going up into Springs, by Ashwaubenon Hall and the Parsons, can't think of it, where, the horses would get shorn.
Yes.
But
Parsons Blacksmith
thank you,
Shop.
Blacksmith was evading me. Among other things, and each of those little hamlets has their own particular identity. Wainscott has its own, characteristics. But I think a lot of people don't recognize that those characteristics are actually what contribute to these bizarrely high real estate values we have, and are not often willing to participate in or do the preservation work that's necessary to keep that heritage and that identity intact. So
I think the town board, I've served on the town board, this is my 12th year. We've done a lot of work in acquisition in historic preservation. We just last year did the 66 Wainscott Main Street, the Osborne Homestead. When you think of the outreach that we got from the community, we had to have a public hearing. How many folks were, vocal and shared how important it was to preserve that? There right now, Ian is leading, Calder Piedmont, my colleague, is leading the charge on developing a management plan for that property, and there's been a lot of interest and dialogue around that. So I think, our kind of our record speaks for itself as far as how we feel about historic preservation. We purchased the Dodge property, as you mentioned, up in the Springs Historic District. where there's a capital project going on right now at the blacksmith shop. It
Right.
needed to be resited, and we're working with the Springs Library. That's an historic building, and that is, getting work and new windows and whatnot. And then a big project we have coming our way is the Carl Fisher House,
Right.
right? So we're fortunate, though, that we have funding in the budget to some extent, because there's a limit on how much we can spend on not so much historic preservation, but maintenance of historic
right,
buildings.
right.
So right now, we're working on how do we lay that plan out over the next 3 to 5 years as to, because the Dodge property needs work, Carl Fisher House needs work. So
Right.
there's,
And
we
more will come.
and more will
Right,
come,
right.
because, we are in a position, because we're so blessed to have the Community Preservation Fund, to be able to retain that community character. There, and making those spaces available. I don't know if you've had an opportunity to get to Duck Creek,
Oh, yeah.
over the
Yeah.
summer, the
No, it's great.
programming
Yeah.
that they put
Yeah.
on there,
No, it's
and the way they
wonderful.
open that up. There's the Edwards House there too. That needs, stabilization and work. So I think that we've been, as a town board, we've been great stewards of historic preservation and making these properties accessible to the community.
Right. I think communities like ours are particularly fortunate, but also it becomes a big, it's expensive.
Yes.
Because the historic restoration has to be done historically accurately in order to maintain the historic designation of the building, and that's about as expensive a way as you can do anything. And I think one of the questions that my board would have is to see if there is some way to petition at some point down the line to get a bigger portion of the CPF funding for maintenance, because maintenance is really, acquisition is one thing.
Right.
But then the maintenance is the ongoing challenge,
Right.
really. And the more buildings you have, if you can't expand that budget, then there's less and less that's able to be apportioned to the
Right,
the
because
assets you have.
you're just gonna stabilize it this year, because you've got to
Correct.
stabilize, it's been a juggling, trying to
Right,
figure out how
right.
to lay out the next
Right.
few years, and I think that that's, something that's very interesting about expanding that budget, because there's getting fewer and fewer properties to acquire.
It seems
and-
like something that each of the 5 East End towns could be looking
Right.
at down the pike. Each of them has different needs.
Right.
Riverhead has
Yeah.
still got a lot of agricultural land that can be purchased and so forth, with the original intention of the CPF, which was to preserve agriculture and so forth. But
And we're also
know-
paying prevailing wage on those
Exactly,
projects, because it's a
exactly.
town project, which adds cost, but at the
Right.
same time, it's to ensure that the folks doing the work are being paid a living wage, and their,
and that it's
benefits all
done
get rolled
correctly,
into that.
100%. No, that's all good. but-
Payrolls get certified and
Yeah,
whatnot.
yeah. No, I get it. But I think, that pot is not growing, and we
Right.
need it to grow.
Yes.
Is kind of where
Yeah.
I'm going
No,
with
I think
that. And
that
I think
that's-
that we, because I know Lynn J. Schneider was the supervisor of Southampton Township. He was complaining because they had a number of buildings that, and I think it's that they couldn't support them because they didn't have the maintenance funds
Right.
in their budget. So I think it's as you're saying, as there are fewer and fewer, areas to preserve, ag land in particular, seems to be the next challenge. So this next question is, there's like 2 of them here. I'm sure you know that the state of New York, a house only has to be 50 years old to be considered historic, which makes me historic.
Funny, because I grew up in a house built in 1929.
There you go. And one of the, obvious challenges we have in the community is that so many homes are bought, raised, and brand-new buildings are put in there. And in some instances, this is fine and it's appropriate. And I'm a full-on supporter of modern architecture. Doesn't have to be old and cedar shingle to, rate 5 stars. But our survey of historic homes, which was done, I think, in the 80s or something, it really needs to be updated. And I'm sure there are historic homes that would merit, designation that we just we haven't done the work on to scope out.
Mm-hmm.
So, A, would you support, an updated survey? And B, how would you feel about, hiring a historic preservationist to work in the planning department to help guide that and the management of the other historic assets and so forth, rather than historic consultants on a contract basis, which I know the town, uses for certain assessments.
So I would be completely open to a survey of historic homes and do that study. I don't know about how it would work. So you're saying hire
Like have a historic department, or a preservationist, someone that, whose responsibility was that particular thing,
Right.
To manage the survey. And then also, because I know I forget what the land management, Ian was talking about, I can't think of the name of the committee, but, that they're,
the property management
property
committee?
management committee, but that the historic assets there require another level of
Right,
oversight
right.
that isn't institutionalized, I guess. And I'm suggesting that you institutionalize some historic preservation position because, people there are informed and so forth, but they have many other responsibilities. And it
right.
would be nice to have someone that could,
Yeah.
in whose basket all those things could be placed.
I mean, I'm open to the idea. The question becomes, it's like, does that person exist that would want to work full-time for the town and
Right.
lives within an easy commute of, of town hall? I mean, that's the thing you're balancing, right?
Right.
So many times we've had to go out to outside professionals
Right.
because we can't find the expertise, to hire on staff.
Locally, yeah, I
So
understand.
that's
yeah.
the balance.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah. Okay, well, that's a good answer, and the survey would be great, so, okay. We did that one. Okay, so I guess this is kind of goes to the commercialization of the neighborhoods that we talked about, but what role do you think government can play in keeping retail options for necessary goods and services available in the local community? It's not specifically about the hollowing out of the residential communities, but it's this cycle that we're in now where it's hard for local people to shop locally. I mean, part of that was the pandemic when everybody was just sort of ordering on Amazon because everything was closed except the grocery store or whatever, it was such a huge shift in the patterns that people had. But it's hard to, you've heard this before, you can't buy a pair of shoelaces, unless you go out to White's in East Hampton, in Montauk, and I don't even know if they carry them anymore. I've been out there in a while. Or you have to go to Sag Harbor. So is there some role that you think government can play in helping to anchor some of those necessary goods and services?
Part of that's a challenge, right? It's supply and demand.
Right.
And what does a square foot of commercial real estate cost in the town of East Hampton? So that's where the challenge,
Right.
lies.
Right.
Those are outside market forces that are setting rents.
Yeah.
So unless you have a benevolent landlord and, there's a couple of, like mom and pop's stores that are still in East Hampton Village, for example, they're really few and far between.
Right.
So that's a challenge. I mean, I think that I will say that I've had in situations where some folks have come to me, young people that have had an idea for a business, and they were kind of toying with it. And is this something that's allowed by code? Is this something that is feasible? Where would this, in what zoning designation with this? And I've had I've brought in planners from the planning department and just have a conversation to say, let me give you. We're not telling them what to do, but we're giving them a little bit of direction and steering them. And how do you interpret the code and so that they could decide, well, would a laundromat work in this particular area?
Yeah. Well, that's interesting. I think part of Oh my gosh, the time has stopped. I have no idea where we are in time. Um, um, There are some models, although I can't think of one off the top of my head, where, and I'm not suggesting this is what we could do, but it seems like it's the real estate, right?
Sure.
That's the problem, is the price of things. And I don't know if at a certain point, where does it tip into the public good for the municipality to say, we're just going to buy a bunch of stores here and lease them at a benevolent landlord pace. We're out of time?
Yeah.
Oh! Well, talk about a conversation.
I guess
Okay.
we weren't working the clock.
I thought it just like went off. I was looking, but oh my goodness. Okay.
Do you want Kathee to do wrap it up, and then it gets
Yeah,
like the
yeah, you
last
wrap it
question gets edited out, so
Yeah, it
you could
doesn't
have a
matter.
closing?
We'll figure it out. You can
Do you
definitely
want
wrap
to?
it
Do you
up.
want to
Okay.
do a closing?
I just wanted to you to talk about the election, but we'll can this question because it's obviously a long chat. Okay, well, I'm going to leave it up to you guys to edit this in such a way that it'll make some sense. Yes, so I'm just going to give you like a minute. You can talk about the. I'll just ask you.
Okay.
Can you? Thank you for coming, and thanks for this conversation. Obviously, we could have gone on, which was really fun for me. I hope it was fun for you too. I wondered if you might could explain to the audience the change in the electoral process for the town government coming up, that why you are running
Sure.
for only a one-year term at this point.
Sure. So the Governor Hochul signed legislation that was passed by both the New York State Senate and Assembly to make local elections on even years.
Okay.
So in order to get the supervisor's position on the even year, I'm only running for a one-year term.
Right.
And the council members and the clerk are running for a three-year term. There are
Okay.
certain positions that are in the Constitution, so while, we'll be on even years, the town justice, the county clerk, and the district attorney will still be on odd years.
Oh, my goodness.
So
Wow.
there'll be an election every year regardless.
Okay.
But
okay.
that's why, I'm only running for a
Okay.
one-year term
All
this
right.
year.
Well, thank you so much for coming and chatting. It was wonderful for me, and I wish you luck in your next term. And, we were lucky to have you today. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Please make sure to go out and vote on Tuesday, November 4th. As my father used to say, if you don't exercise your franchise, you lose your right to complain. So be part of the process. Thanks, LTV. Yay.
Thank you.